morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320, as well as on the web at WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from River Cities Media, which reminds me to tell you that you can hear all of my interviews and hear and watch. Yes, you'll find out I do have a face for radio, whether it's being with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink, like this morning, or Wood County Board Chairman Lance Plimmel, all month long on River Cities Community Access Media. Tune in on cable TV, Channel 3 on Solaris or Charter 985, or on the web at rccamedia.org. You can watch the Morning Magazine on RCCA Media. With that, it's your time to talk back to City Hall. Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is here. He's brought along a very special guest, and the phone lines are open. This is a listening session, folks. 424-2600, pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. With that, we welcome the Mayor of Wisconsin Rapids, Zach Vruwink. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Carl. Thanks for having me again.
It's good to be here, instead of out there.
That's right. That's very true.
This cold weather, the way it has played out, I know earlier we had problems with water mains breaking and the like. Are you concerned about that happening again with this extended stretch of even colder weather?
Well, the duration is obviously of concern. Last year, we hope that we don't have a year like we did last year, where the length was so long that obviously drove frost and things deeper in the ground. We had a nasty water main break at the corner, as most people remember, 1st Street North and the Riverview Expressway, which was a very bad intersection for that to occur. And you can do so much predictive analysis about where they're going to be, and you can lower only so many every year. The reality is, living in this state and in this climate, you're going to have those concerns every winter.
And we've talked about this before. A lot of times when you do reconstruction projects, you find out that some of your infrastructure is really old.
Yeah,
no question. When really old infrastructure gets hit with a large chunk of ice going through the ground, it's going to break.
Yeah, well, and the depth, comes down to the sheer depth of these things. If the deeper they are, the less likely they are to break. Obviously, age has some concern as it relates to its longevity, but the depth is a big factor.
Okay, well, like I said, everybody just be safe. Yeah. That's the important thing.
Yeah, they haven't issued, I guess, on that point, the Water and Light Commission has not issued any water runs that have been widespread.
They did that last year, I remember.
Yeah, so at this point, that hasn't occurred. If it has, there's been some neighborhoods that are typically on that system sooner than other neighborhoods are. So obviously, when those things come out, if they do, let's hope they don't, but if they do, make sure people heed them.
Yes, and we'll let you know right away, because we'll get the announcement from the utility and we'll break in and let you know about it. But we're going to be talking about code enforcement this morning. Why don't you introduce our special guest?
Well, we've got Ray Starks with us today. Ray, it's got to be close to a year since you've been with the city. Not quite?
Not quite. We started last year in April is when I started with the code enforcement office.
All right. Well,
I remember.
Glad to have Ray on board, because Ray's been able to bring his law enforcement background to the city, obviously to a very important segment of city services, and that is code enforcement.
That's where I remember Ray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, many people do. They kind of look at Ray.
Police beat reporter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Look at Ray and they think, you look familiar.
Yeah, I still get quite a few comments asking what I'm doing there.
I'm sure that too, yeah.
Remember me from my past and go, hope that I'm not there for that reason.
That leads into something that I wanted to talk about, which I think ties together, and that was during your State of the City address. You announced, and we broadcasted here on AM 1320 as well, and that you were launching a citizen reporting app. App is short for application, and it's something on your smartphone, which is a computer or a tablet computer that you can hit on and do reporting. Why don't you explain the idea behind it and how it's going to work for the city?
Well, it's really an extension of the work that we've begun very early on in my administration at the City Hall, and that has been, how do we bolster success within neighborhoods? How do we, if it's a neighborhood cleanup or if it's a neighborhood watch, as we've talked with Kathy Rash up in the Ward 1 area on your show previously, we thought, well, we've got great success neighborhood by neighborhood, ward by ward. We didn't really have a cross-city solution yet. And we realized, actually I discovered this some time ago, that technology can play a significant role in helping us achieve that goal of having better neighborhoods, stronger neighborhoods where neighbors are working with neighbors to resolve problems. And in this case, we launched C-Click Fix, which is a citizen reporting app for citizens and city employees and visitors alike to be able to report issues to City Hall. And so it's designed to report neighborhood issues like broken sidewalks or unshoveled sidewalks, maybe traffic signals that are malfunctioning, signs that have fallen down or are missing. Really, you name it. There's a wide range of submission opportunities for neighborhoods.
Well, and Ray, back from your police enforcement days, this could be useful. For instance, if you have a dangerous stretch of road where you have a pothole starting to form that could become a real hazard, before it happens, someone could take a picture and send it to you, and something can happen.
And that's the idea behind C-Click Fix is it gives anybody out there an opportunity to, when they see something, to immediately report it and get a response back, which is a major portion of C-Click Fix, is you get a response right away.
I was thinking, too, people complain sometimes about blind intersections. Well, there's this brush or these bushes at this intersection. They haven't been trimmed back in eons, and it's really a dangerous intersection. You could take a picture of that intersection.
Absolutely. And the reality is we've got 151 street miles of road and number of square miles of city, and we've got one Ray. And the reality is Ray can't be everywhere at any given time. So to empower residents to be able to capture a photo, not only does it capture a photo if they're using their smartphone, but it also captures the location. So Ray can immediately either pull up the picture, dial up the location, maybe even not even have to drive out there right away to initiate the process to get that started. So it's improving the efficiency of that, but it helps Ray be more effective so he can do more of these in a given time.
What is code enforcement? Let's start off with basics. Code enforcement 101. People probably hear about that and go, okay, Ray, what's your new job?
Okay, that's simple enough. Every city, every municipality has code. Matter of fact, there's even a book called the International Code Enforcement, which most municipalities draw from to help them in writing their codes. And realistically, what code is it's a way of making your city a better place. It's a way of keeping track of residences and streets and intersections and saying, okay, this is dangerous or this doesn't live up to what would be called community standards. And code helps everybody come up to community standard. If you're living in a spot, and I'm a Ward 1 resident, so Kathy Rash and I are very familiar with each other, especially since I started this job. There's areas within each of these places in your community ward, whether it's Ward 1 or 2 or 6, it doesn't matter. Each area has a place that they look at and go, boy, I wish somebody had cleaned that up. And what code is, code gives us the opportunity as a city to go in and look at this area also and say, this really doesn't come up to the standards of the rest of your area or the rest of your block or the rest of your community. We'd like you to bring this up to standard. And not only would we like you to, we can send you a letter, we can stop and talk to you about it. And if you just absolutely refuse to do it, we also have a little teeth there too, because there is a fine that we can enforce if you don't bring your areas up to community standards.
Now, what type of things are we talking about?
Well, it could be as simple as rubbish and garbage. That's a big one. If you leave a lot of rubbish around your property, if you don't pick it up. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about if you've got a pile of kids, you've got toys laying in your yard. I'm talking about real garbage.
Yeah, I think we all know.
Yeah, we've all seen that.
Parked cars all over the place.
Parked cars are their own category. And that's a big one. We have a lot of vehicles in the city of Wisconsin Rapids. You're not allowed to park your vehicle on a space that is not paved or surfaced in some manner, whether it be gravel or road surface or pavement of some type. You can't do it. You can't park your car there. It has to be parked on a paved surface. And that's a big thing in the city. Excuse me. It's not only an eyesore. The real issue there is when people park in their yards, what they don't realize is every time they're backing in and out, they're tearing up the grass. They're creating a mud hole. I've seen some of these instances where you actually have ruts in the yard, and every time you pull out, you're dragging that out. And where does that go? It goes right into your street and right into your sewer system, right into your water systems for your sewers.
Okay.
So there's reasons for all of these things. Parking's a big one. Garbage and rubbish are a big one. I also have to enforce if you have too many animals. The city has a code that says you can't have more than two. We're kind of like the Ark. You can't have more than two of anything.
Okay.
So you have to have. You can get a permit. There's an exemption, but you have to apply for it. And it's our way of controlling how many animals are within the city, and also our way of controlling puppy farms. We don't want any.
Oh, yeah. What about abandoned? One of the big issues in this city is abandoned homes, or they've either were rentals, or they were people left the home and it's never been sold, never rented or something, and gradually the property deteriorates. There's grass growing, there's
yeah, and we run into those more and more, and that's an economic thing that it's going to rise and fall with the economy. But what you see is people have had to walk away from their homes for various reasons, and no one is actually taking over the property and trying to take care of it. So it's an issue, and we do have a way of dealing with it.
I'll give you another one. People, because of the economy, have been doing, like, say, remodeling work in phases because they can't afford to do everything at once. So, okay, this summer we're going to do the roof. Next summer we're going to do painting, or we're going to do, they might have scaffolding up, and they might have. How does the code handle that? Because as long as you're doing work, as long as you have the proper permitting, I guess that's the important thing.
Right, and there's a date on your permit. You have a certain amount of time when you receive your permit. You have a certain amount of time to complete this work.
Which is why you should deal with a good local contractor.
Exactly.
Who knows the city law and has the permits and can
simply pull them online. In some cases, you can pull those permits online. You don't have to show up to City Hall to pull the permit initially. So there's some economy of scale and efficiency.
As I'm looking at working my old place, and that's one of the things I'm making sure is that's going to be someone that licensed, bonded.
Sometimes it's overlooked, but it's oftentimes for their protection, if not every time.
Yeah. We got our first caller, gentlemen, this morning. Good morning. You're on the Morning Magazine.
Good morning. Sounds like a good program, so I thought I'd better drop in.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I know the mayor, and I think the other gentleman will know who I am when I start talking. I'm not so sure you remember me or not, Carl.
I remember you.
Oh, okay. So anyhow, they're on my subject, and it couldn't be a better time. I'm referring to automobiles, boats, trailers, camping trailers, fifth wheels, and you know which one I'm referring to there, gentlemen. How can we get away with blocking sidewalk? We extend and we park it in the driveway, and it comes out there to within a couple of feet of the highway, of the road, the street. Now, I would think that something should be done about it. I back out of my driveway. I'm going to tell you again, we get sick and tired of hearing it, but I back out of my driveway, and I have one hell of a time looking down the street in front of a fifth wheel.
Okay.
It's a hazard.
Okay, Ray.
There's no doubt about it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Let Ray respond to your concern.
And I do recognize who's talking. We've spoken before, and he and I have talked about this issue at length. There is, in his particular area, there actually is no sidewalk. So
Pardon me, say that again?
In your particular area, there actually is no sidewalk there.
There's a room for the sidewalk.
There's always a room for the sidewalk. The city owns a piece of that property.
You should take it in consideration that there is a sidewalk.
And it's been looked at Under this particular instance, and I'll deal with this one directly because we have talked about it. It has been looked at not only by myself but by the police department, and there really isn't a violation there that we can hang our hat on to say you can't do this.
Mayor, can't we make a violation throughout the city?
That would be an ordinance, a law.
Right. There's always an opportunity to amend the code.
Let's go to the council. Let's make an ordinance.
Sure. Well, in that case, I think I think we've spoken about opportunity to sit down and go through what in the code should be amended to reflect the situation. But as Ray's saying, how do you create a violation, or language that could make that a violation? And I think, we have to be very careful too that we don't create consequences on the other side, that we create a monster out of something that we didn't intend to create.
Well, this is a monster. I think it's better to create something now than wait for a death or an accident.
Sure, and I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying we have to weigh
you have to do things the right way so that it's enforceable. Mm-hmm. Just writing an ordinance that isn't enforceable isn't going to solve this gentleman's problem.
Right.
You need to come up with an ordinance that actually solves the problem.
Yeah, bad law doesn't solve any problems. You need something that is incontestable. I mean, something that you can hang your hat on and say, you absolutely cannot do this. And if you don't have that, people are going to fight you on it, and you're going to spend a lot of time and money and a lot of city resources fighting something that you're not going to win.
In court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of lawyers will make a lot of money.
Well, right, and that's an important point.
I know what that is.
When Ray writes a citation, maybe in this case, it's going to go to municipal court, and there's an opportunity and due process for folks to be able to contest those things, and so Ray also has to make sure that his case is sound before he gets to that level.
Do you suggest a petition to the council?
Have you spoken with your alderman about this particular situation?
I spoke to 3 different aldermen. I spoke to Ray there. I spoke to you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's all the further we get. It's talked about. I'm trying to get some action, put some teeth into it.
I think these gentlemen would suggest is, get to working. I think a petition would be a good thing.
Well, a petition very specific about what's the change they wish to see, and if it's not a petition per se, what's the language that we need to look at? If it's a consideration of language, but we're in the position where we're not going to write that. Somebody else has to propose that, and if it's a council member or if it's somebody working with the city attorney, all as possibilities. The
other option you have is, because you are dealing with a safety issue, you can actually go to the state with this. This could go much further than a municipal ordinance. This could go to a state law, because there are laws regarding parking over sidewalks and vision triangles, and those are state laws. And if you really feel that a municipal ordinance isn't going to do it or cannot be properly written, which in this case I don't know that we have one that's enforceable, this is something you could take to the state level and look at a law being rewritten to include areas that don't have sidewalk but where something extends out into that.
Would you suggest you contact the local DOT office then here?
Actually, I would probably start with my legislature.
Representative Krug.
I'd go to him, explain the situation to him, and say, is there something we can do about this on the state level where the law could be enforceable?
Okay.
Well, the law should be, if it was made to be enforceable, any vehicle parked in front of a homeowner to the street. There should be no trailers, no boats, no snowmobiles, none of that junk.
Well, I guess we've given you some resources. I would continue talk to your alderman, talk to your neighbors, get a petition going.
Okay, I will take your advice and try that, Ray. I really will.
Okay.
Thanks for your call.
Thank you both.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, I can understand the gentleman's frustration. Mm-hmm. If it is a danger, if it's something that's the other thing. We live in and like you mentioned, you live in the first ward. Mm-hmm. A lot of our city wards are compact areas that were built eons ago, in the early days of our city. And like all cities, whether they're smaller ones like ours or bigger ones, you have congestion. But it's like the amount of toys people have collected over the centuries since those neighborhoods were built has grown exponentially.
And many times they've outgrown their yard space, their garage space. I mean, we look at campers, and I know that's this particular gentleman's problem is a fifth wheel. And
that's almost like a mobile home.
It's a monster. Yeah, it's very large. And quite honestly, when you look at the property that it's attached to, you can't put it in the garage. The garage is nowhere near large enough, and the property really doesn't have the room. So it's going to be an issue, not only for him, it's going to be an issue for the property owner too. You know, I've worked and saved and scrimped, and I bought this, I purchased this. Now,
and this
what
is
do you
my
want me
property.
to do with it?
Yeah, right.
This is my property now. What do you suggest I do with it? And that's the other side of this coin also. You know, property owners are looking at me like, well, what do you mean I can't park here? You know, and sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And in this instance, under this particular circumstance, they can. So, and I don't know what else.
The other thing that explains the growth of storage areas.
Right. People are keeping more stuff, and they need to. If they can't store it on their property, on their lot, they need to find a place to store it. And you're right. There's no shortage of storage units in our area.
They seem to be popping up everywhere because obviously there's a need, and I don't see that need going away anytime soon with all the toys that people are collecting.
Well, to Ray's point, you know, you saved and saved and saved to make this purchase, and now you've got to store it, right? And if you haven't saved to store it off-site, that's an additional cost. So it's a tough situation.
Would you suggest, Ray, when people are going to purchase something like that, and they live in a congested area, maybe get in contact with the city and go, can I store this legally on my contact you, use the app if they got a smartphone, click, this is where I live, can I store this, here's a picture of what I'm going to be purchasing, or can I store this here, or am I going to have to figure in location off-site to store my toy?
That goes to whether it's better to plan ahead or beg forgiveness.
That's right.
End. But I'm always willing to answer those questions. I'm always willing to come out and take a look and say, okay, you have this much room, and this is what you can do or cannot do to store these things. So I'd be happy to answer those questions.
And that goes to one of the, sometimes you run into code enforcement issues involving uses of land. And people, I thought I could do this. Yeah. We've always done it this way, or we always held this event this way. Well, maybe it was
gotten away with it.
They got away, right? And really, before you do anything, you should contact your office.
They should contact us, or I'm actually attached to the Office of Planning and Economic Developments, and there's a wealth of information there. If you call up and talk to Peggy, the administrative assistant up there, or Adam Teagan, they have a wealth of information that they can give you. And if it comes right down to the code, they'll just direct it to me, and I will sit and talk with you ad nauseum until we get something straightened out.
Okay. We got to take our first break of the morning, and the phone lines are open. If you'd like to talk to Ray, maybe you're thinking of something you'd like to do on your property, and you're wondering if you can, give Ray a call this morning, or talk to the mayor, or you might have some ideas about how the city should address this issue of this collection of stuff. How do we enforce our codes, make our city a little more livable looking, and et cetera, et cetera. The phone lines are open at 424-2600, pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. You're listening to The Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and WFHR.com. And also here this morning is RCCA Media. Back with more after this from Comfort Air.
Wisconsin Rapids has an app that allows anyone to report and track issues anywhere in the area. You can help us find issues that may need repair or the city's attention, like a damaged sidewalk, graffiti, or a pothole. With your smartphone or tablet, just snap a picture, and after a few simple clicks, report the problem to us. Your location is submitted automatically when you submit your report. You can also check on the progress of the report anytime. Download the app from the App Store or our website at wirapids.org, making Wisconsin Rapids a better place, one click at a time.
Good morning and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thanks, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody, to today's show on AM 1320 and also on the web at WFHR.com. And we also welcome our friends from River City's Community Access Media, which reminds me to remind you that RCCA Media is where you can watch the Morning Magazine, my interviews with Mayor Vruwink or Wood County Board Chairman Lance Plimmel all month long on River City's Community Access Media. You can tune in on cable channel 3 on Solaris or Charter 985 or on the web at rccamedia.org. Watch the Morning Magazine all month long on RCCA Media. And we invite your phone calls this morning at 424-2600, pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. Mayor Zach Vruwink is here, and Code Enforcement Officer Ray Starks is here. And we just had an extensive discussion with a gentleman who was upset about a fifth wheel blocking his vision triangle and getting out of the street. And we talked about the fact that we're seeing, people collecting more and more toys, and I've seen them around the city. Mm-hmm. You got boats, you got snowmobiles, and you're going, isn't there? And I've sometimes wondered, aren't there rules about how you have to store those things and everything else? What is the basic? Could you Ray, give just a basic description of what current ordinance is with regards to those types of things?
The current ordinance states that you cannot store any vehicle on a surface that is unsurfaced. Okay, you can't put it on the grass is realistically what it amounts to. If you have gravel, if you have pavement, you may park it there. And this goes to trailers, boats, campers, anything with wheels that you can tow in and out of your yard has to be on some type of surface. Okay, well, we have another caller, so let's get to their question. Good morning, you're on the Morning Magazine.
Yes, my question is there an ordinance as to how many vehicles you can park on your property?
No, there really isn't. A number doesn't enter into the ordinance. It's just where you park them. If you want to pave your entire yard over, if the city will, you have to get a permit to do all that paving. But if you want to pave your entire yard over and park it in, as long as you're not running a business out of your home, you can have quite a few vehicles.
Do they have to be licensed?
Yes, that they do. All vehicles, if they're on your property, must have current registration on them, and they must run. So you can't have junk.
Yeah, you can't have abandoned. Yeah.
Right, and that's an issue also. People have vehicles that have some damage to them, and they drag them home and they park them in their yard and with every intent to do something with them, and then they sit there. And that becomes an issue, and I've run into that several times already. And once you talk to the people, they're usually pretty good about getting rid of them or doing something else with them, getting them out of the yard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your call. And the phone lines are open at 424-2600, pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. It looks like we're going to be busy this morning, gentlemen. Good morning. You're on the air with Mayor Vruwink and Ray Starks.
Yes, I got a question for the mayor. You think it would be possible to have the city get out and clean up the streets a little bit sooner? I'll give you two incidents. February 4th and I think it was February 11th. The streets were terrible as far as being slippery by the hospital, also up toward 8th Street South and by Home Depot. Matter of fact, they took the signal light down over by the hospital that day. It's glare ice. And the reason I'm asking is because I saw two salt trucks sitting where they take the leaves and stuff on the intersection by Home Depot there. They were sitting off on the side, and the streets are slipperier than heck, and they're sitting there.
Sure.
And I run semi through town here a number of times a day, and if there's any way that you could maybe clamp down on them and tell them to try to clean the streets up, and especially salt the intersections, because they're terrible. Mm-hmm. And I love giving you compliments in the summer when you do an excellent job with cutting the grass coming into town, you make the city look beautiful. But, to avoid some accidents, have them salt the intersections a little bit better. And if you check, you'll see that they did tear that stoplight down that day, and another guy I run with, he says he got on the brakes and he says it's none but glare ice on the intersection. Mm-hmm. So I'll listen for your comment.
Sure, I appreciate the call.
Thank you for the call.
And bringing that to our attention. A couple of things on to the point of timeliness. I think it's important for us to be reminded as to when is practice for the city to get out after a snow event.
Or ice
event or any other event. Typically on a snow event, it's towards the tail end. Now, if there's a long, extended event that's going to occur and we're going to get a lot of snow, I mean, they don't wait until the end of the event where it's quit snowing. Ultimately, they've got a budget to maintain, but it's not to say that they that's where they have to start and stop. They ultimately have to keep the streets safe. But in this case, I will relay that if you do see these situations at intersections, to please call the street department. The street department, street superintendent, or anybody else.
Could this new app help in this?
Most definitely, but ultimately want to avoid distracted driving and all of that.
What about, so I'm glad you got Ray here, because Ray was a police officer. Mm-hmm. If a police officer on patrol notices, hey, as we're getting really slippery here, can they radio in and say, we better get some salt?
Oh, they do constantly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's anytime you're out on patrol, and of course I'm a retired officer now, but the officers out there, when they notice these things, anything that's hazardous, they do report these things immediately, and the response is they go to dispatch. Dispatch goes to the appropriate authority. In this case, would be the streets department. They'd contact them and tell them.
And then there is a priority listing, I know, because of state highways get priority over city sites. You might want to review that for our listeners.
Right. It's arterials and collector streets, and then obviously the rest of the residentials that follow. So their first priority is to get the main arterials opened up and safe, and obviously that's salting, sanding, plowing, any degree of necessary.
What about getting out and salting in advance of a storm? I've seen that happening, like they've been doing that in the south with their ice storms, or out east with their blizzards that they've been having. If you know we're going to get hit, let's go lay down a layer of stuff on the road.
Well, there's a practice difference there. We still use rock salt in the city. In fact, we were hoping to trial a brine, a salt brine.
Okay, that's what I think they're talking about, a brine.
Yeah, in fact, the state, if you drive on 51 or 9094, they actually do pre-salt the bridges. You see that. You'll see a coating over the bridge when you approach it. In fact, I saw it being done. I thought, that's strange. It's not snowing, it's not raining, but obviously they're being prepared. And so that's something that I know the county has been doing here locally, Wood County. But to the caller's point, if you're seeing those things, make sure they're reported, because we'd like to think that, again, to the point we raised about Ray, that officers or the street department is recognizing these things. But heck, if you've got salters or sanders in the neighboring intersection, report that so they can get out there and drop some salt or sand.
And maybe talk to these guys if you notice something too. Just some common sense as an operator of a salt truck. If you notice, hey, there's people sliding through that intersection, guys, let's go up there and lay down some salt.
Yeah, and as we know, if you have a hard, cold winter like we've got today,
that salt doesn't work.
It doesn't, and so that's where that salt brine mix is very handy. And so I have nothing to report, unfortunately, this year on that. That was supposed to be a trial, and I'm not sure how far they got.
So what will it take for us to go into that type of a system?
We have to retrofit a truck, and we were supposed to get the equipment, I believe, from Marshfield. They had been City of Marshfield had been testing it, and that's what was driving this, that we could get their equipment to pilot it. And then if we decide that it's more effective in some of these intersections that are heavily trafficked, or that the salt and sand don't seem to be doing the trick, the salt and salt brine mixture would be applied and then tested for its.
Well, that expressway bridge would be a great area. I mean, same here. I mean,
especially because the intersection's on each side, right? Yeah, that's a raceway,
and then it can get, especially up at the top of it, because you're so high up.
Right.
Even if you have air temperature that's above freezing, it can freeze on top of that that bridge.
Yeah. Well, and they do, as you see on a lot of, like on Highway 10, the state highways have now put a coarser surface so people are able to get better traction, but that doesn't do the trick entirely.
Hopefully that we can get that experiment or that, and then see if that would work, because that could maybe be a nice solution to the problem that the gentleman just identified.
Right.
Let's get back to the phones, gentlemen, and go to our next caller. Good morning. You're on the Morning Magazine.
Yeah, Ray and Mayor, I got to commend you guys how you put up with all the, I don't know how to really describe it. Like the guy with the fifth wheel trailer. Sounds like he has a problem backing out of his driveway. The other person owns the property. There's nothing against the law of him parking it there. He says he can't see when he backs out of his driveway. Maybe he needs to back in his driveway and drive out. And I just wonder if some of these people that want to keep making up all the different rules, can't do this, can't do that, you continue to do that, and pretty soon you have so many rules nobody wants to buy your property when you decide to put it up for sale, because they absolutely can't do anything with it. And I just wanted to commend them, too, that it takes special people to put up with all that nonsense, I'm going to say, the best word I can say for it.
Thank you.
Some people just get way carried away. You have to understand, when you live in a city, you live among others, and there's things you're going to have to tolerate. You know, maybe a person like that needs to live out in the country where you don't have close neighbors. People need to have a better understanding of that. Okay?
Thanks for the call. And obviously, it's a balance. As Ray has talked about, it's a standard. You know, we all pay property taxes in the city if we own property in the city. And we want a standard.
That's why I brought up this issue.
Yeah.
I mean, like you talked about, people have worked their whole lives, and all of a sudden they got that dream fishing boat.
Right.
And, hey, it's on pavement, but maybe it is a little bit of a blocking thing. They're going, as Ray pointed out, hey, what about my rights? And the other, and that I thank the caller for, you bring up, you keep adding rules and ordinances and regulations. We've already got an ordinance book, and I wonder how many of those ordinances are enforced. And how often do we go through it and go, okay, we got this, and we got the same thing over here, and do we ever, it's called recodification, I know.
And that's part of what I've done since I've been here. That was one of the requests that was made of me when I started here, to go through the ordinances, not only from a learning prospect on my behalf, because I have to know these things. People are going to ask these questions, but I also look to things that may not be worded just the way we want it, or don't really apply anymore, or don't apply to our particular city. And we deal a lot with international property maintenance code, and there's a book, and they redo that every couple of years. That book is brand new, and you go through and you go, wow, that really doesn't apply to Wisconsin Rapids. So we bring it down and we look at what applies to Wisconsin Rapids, and then we make changes and codify things to what we feel we need to do here in the city. Every problem is a local problem. Doesn't matter where you are. Everything is a community problem. Everything's a neighborhood problem. Everything is your neighbor's problem. It all comes down to getting along with your neighbors, and sometimes things change in your neighborhood. So you make a decision that I don't like this, and then it becomes an issue, and that's where these things start.
Oh yeah. For instance, say if you're going to be having a major project on your home, and you're going to have vehicles parked everywhere for contractors and maybe notify your neighbors and say, hey, listen, I hate for any inconvenience, but I'm going through a remodeling of my home, and there's going to be trucks here during the day.
That's right.
And you're going to have hammering and noise, and just, I got all the permits, it's all legal, but I just want to be a good neighbor and let you know and apologize for any inconvenience.
And that's the key, being a good neighbor. And that's the key to anything in any type of enforcement, is if people remember to be a neighbor. You're not the only one living in your neighborhood. You're not the only one there. You have neighbors. Talk to them. Find out what's going on in your neighborhood, and that goes right back into the C-Click Fix. That's also about neighbors. looking at neighbors and saying, okay, maybe I've talked to my neighbor, maybe I see something that's a danger to my entire neighborhood, and now we're going to go and we're going to report this.
Before we got some calls, I was going to bring this up because we've had some economic hard stretch, and we have some neighborhoods that are going through some rough stretches, and they might not have the resources available to do some of the fix-ups that's needed, and they have all the intention in the world. And how are we going to address that problem? First off, I think if we can raise the standard of living for everybody, then everybody will have the money to go and do the kind of things that they all want to do with their property. Right.
That would be the goal, but of course we don't have that capability. I can't go out and give everybody a $20 an hour job.
But I know your job, but you try to work with folks.
Yes, I do.
And you try to take in their actual situation. You're not there to go, hey, I got you, here's your citation.
Yeah, citation's always the last resort. That's the very last thing. There's people in the community that I'm working with on a regular basis because they have issues that need solving, and I realize that sometimes they don't have the resources, or like today, I wouldn't expect somebody to go out and and pick up their yard when it's sub-zero.
They probably wouldn't be able to get it out of the ground. It'd be frozen.
Exactly. So a lot of common sense comes into play. But we also look at different things, too. I generally, when they're available, I carry pamphlets for block grants, community grants that are available when you get into these depressed areas where they need some serious help. We try to find them some help. It's not just an issue of, I'm here, you have to fix this now, and they're saying, I've been out of work for 2 years, I can't do this. Okay, well, let me look and see if there's a resource available. So I do look, and like last year I gave out applications for a block grant to a couple of different folks in the community that had a need. And it's not just a need, not just a monetary need, but they need to have their home fixed up so they can live in it. So we went the route of trying to help them get block grants. I went to the point of even offering to help fill out the grant. It's just common sense goes such a long way.
That's it. We want and it's going to take time. These things don't happen overnight. And contract. Well, look at all. You're still going to have a bunch of out-of-town contractors this spring trying to finish up work from the hails. There's still homes that need to be evaluated yet because the snow hit so early. People that had I was supposed to have my house inspected, and then the snow came.
Right. Or those like myself who haven't gotten their roof repaired. Right. And I know that's going to happen, and we're going to at least have another summer of all that work. And to Ray's point, when we sat back and looked at the code enforcement program that the city offered, previously we had 2 part-time ordinance control officers that worked very inconsistent schedules, and it was really a challenge for the city to get resolution on a lot of these lingering issues that have been allowed to exist for a long time. So when we sat back and looked at that, we obviously made Ray's position a full-time position and said, how much more effectiveness can we get out of a full-time ordinance control officer? And I would say, by every stretch of imagination, it's been a success. I mean, not only is it just based on the number of contacts he's been making, but obviously the resolution he is ultimately making as well. And to your point, things don't get solved by simply 1 visit or 2 visits maybe. It may even be a number of visits. And a time to cure. You also need to give folks a time to cure. If it's long grass and weeds or parked cars, I mean, there's all these times to cure. In that
we got to take one more break. I want to talk about the issue of out-of-town landowners or landlords and property problems there. You're listening to the Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from RCCA Media this morning. Back with more right after this.
Wisconsin Rapids has an app that allows anyone to report and track issues anywhere in the area. You can help us find issues that may need repair or the city's attention, like a damaged sidewalk, graffiti, or a pothole. With your smartphone or tablet, just snap a picture, and after a few simple clicks, report the problem to us. Your location is submitted automatically when you submit your report. You can also check on the progress of the report anytime. Download the app from the App Store or our website at wirapids.org, making Wisconsin Rapids a better place, one click at a time.
code enforcement officer, is here. Okay, gentlemen, one of the things that we've talked about before, and I've talked with your predecessors, and other mayors have dealt with this, out-of-town landlords or property owners, and they got a property, and usually the grass needs mowing, and people are going, "What's going on?
Or it's vacant.
Or it's vacant. How are we trying to address that?"
Well, the big thing is we try and keep contact with them. We attempt contact. If I have a phone number, I'll call. If not, I send letters and attempt contact with them about their properties, and just ask. What going forth? What are you going to do? And sometimes we get a response, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes we just, long grass. I send the city crew, and that goes. They get a bill. And there's nothing more I can do about that.
Right. So, but we're trying, and that has always been there's this rental unit on my corner, and it's some person in Florida owns the property, and
Right. Yeah, they've decided to relocate, and they've kept ownership of the home to rent it out. I mean, that's a common occurrence in the city as people retire and move out of town, or winter somewhere else, and that sort of thing. And to Ray's point, it's all about being friendly. I mean, it's not coming down with a hammer and slapping somebody's wrist, but sometimes it is at the same time. But you've got to give people the opportunity to cure and to fix the situation, and keeping contact is critical. As we've sent letters, Ray and I, what's your plan? If you don't have a plan, we're going to force you to come up with a plan and get it to us before we have to go to enforcement.
That leads to the other issue of land that is for sale,
right,
and is not maintained. Mm-hmm. How are we working with the holders of that land to say, hey, listen, what's your plan for this land, or please at least keep the vision triangle on the street if it's on a corner or what have you?
Yeah, we speak with them frequently. It's you'll have these properties and people call up and say, gee, they never do anything with it. And so you go and you look and you say, okay, I agree that something needs to be done. And then you go through the city records and you find out who owns the property and you start making contacts. And honestly, there's been occasion where we've had at least one property owner that thought it was cheaper for the city to cut his grass than to maintain it himself.
Yeah.
It does happen.
Well, at least we're getting some money out of it.
Yeah, we do bill.
We're breaking even is what we are. Exactly, because we can't make a profit on it.
We do bill for these things because there's a lot of manpower, and it's people call me up occasionally and say, well, just send a crew over there to fix it. Well, they also have to understand that that's their tax dollars at work, and there's an expense to that, and the city, as the mayor said, is not allowed to make a profit on this, so we have to bill us at a break-even rate, and there's something else that these crews could be doing. So that's also kind of goes to a last resort type of thing. We try to get the property owner to be responsible. We make as many contacts as we can, and we talk to them and try to make them responsible for their own properties.
Real quick, Ray, before we let you go, the phone number people can reach you at.
They can contact me at my office and leave a message. It's 715-421-8229. Or they can contact Planning and Economic Development. That's the office I work out of. And they can talk to a live body there because I try not to be in the office too much. There's things to be looked at out in the city.
And for the app, I guess it's cclickfix.com?
Yeah, that's where it can be checked out or downloaded from people's smartphones, tablets, anybody that's iPhone, Android capable across the board. Okay.
Well, this has been a very interesting conversation, and I appreciate our listeners getting involved. Let's do this more often. Yeah. I would like to have I like it when you folks call and express your concerns or ideas or suggestions. This has been a fun hour, and I appreciate, gentlemen, your time to visit with our listeners. Stay warm, have a good weekend, and just remember, in 40 days, at the end of Lent is Easter, and it will be spring. That's awesome.
One last quick thing, Carl. Last night, the City Council at their meeting initiated the process for city work related to the hail damage that occurred with city property last year. We've got a number of local contractors asking when that work is going to be made available. The insurance review is now complete, and watch for an RFP to come out next week for general contractors to bid on city work. So there'll be a process involved. So if people are interested in performing work for the city, to contact City Hall, particularly buildings and grounds.
Okay. With that, we're going to wrap up this edition of the Morning Magazine. As always, it's been brought to you by Comfort Air. I'm Carl. Have a great day, and as always, take care. We'll join CBS after this.